Thank you very much, Kim. And welcome, everybody. And thank you for joining R2i and IBM this afternoon for our discussion about IT infrastructure cyber resiliency. My name is Roger Osmond, and I am the General Manager of the R2i Ontario division. I have spent over 30 years in the IT industry, the first 15 at IBM, and then in various sales and business leadership roles within Canadian solution providers, and joined R2i earlier this year to lead the Ontario team. Joining me today from IBM is Costa Makropoulos, and he will be our feature presenter. Costa has been with IBM for 23 years and has spent the last 12 as a consulting technical specialist, focusing on storage infrastructure and storage software solutions. He brings a wealth of knowledge on data center and IT infrastructure resiliency. Also participating this afternoon is Nicholas Brodeur. Nicholas won't be presenting, but will participate in the question and answer session at the end of this presentation. Nicholas manages the client architecture team at R2i. He's been in the industry for 30 years and has a background in designing highly resilient IT infrastructure solutions, whether they be traditional, hybrid, or cloud-based. And now just a quick look at the agenda. Following my short introduction of R2i, Costa will update us on the ever-increasing threat of cybercrime. What exactly is a cyber resilient IT infrastructure? Why is it important? And how does that differ from cybersecurity? We'll then look at a cyber resiliency framework, again, which we can assess and compare IT infrastructures. We'll then look at best practices and some next steps to help incorporate some of these best practices into your own IT infrastructure. And lastly, we'll open it up for questions and discussion, and we promise to get you out of here by 12:30, as promised. Firstly, just a little bit about R2i. R2i was founded in Montreal in 2014 and has grown to over 40 employees. Sorry, just the one above, please, Costa. Yeah, founded in 2014. We've grown to over 40 employees with offices in Montreal, Ottawa, and Toronto. The R in R2i stands for resources and speaks to the highly skilled technical and sales professionals who on average have over 25 years or more of experience. The two I's stand for infrastructure and integration. Infrastructure being our traditional focus and strength, and integration meaning the integration of our clients into our various managed services, as well as our R2i public cloud offerings. The next chart, a little bit more about us. At R2i, we specialize in data center, IT infrastructure, cloud computing, digital transformation, and artificial intelligence. Our consulting services and 724 managed services professionals are all Canadian-based, as is our R2i cloud that resides in 3 data centers in the Montreal and Toronto areas. Our historical IT infrastructure focus includes servers, storage, and networking, but also virtualized, hyperconverged, disaster recovery, high availability solutions, etc., just to name a few. We also help customers move to the private, public, or hybrid clouds. We help modernize and transform their applications and help move them along a journey towards harnessing artificial intelligence to optimize their businesses. And the next chart, please, Costa. And we do all of this in partnership with our leading edge vendors, such as IBM, where we hold the coveted Platinum Partner status. And our success has been rewarded with multiple business and technology awards from organizations and associations across the country. And with that, that ends my R2i introduction, and I'll pass it over to Costa for a deeper look at IT infrastructure cyber resiliency. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. So the question of the day is your IT infrastructure cyber resilient? I'm Costa Makropoulos, presenting here on behalf of IBM Canada. We're going to be focusing primarily on storage resilience in terms of IT infrastructure. Now, it should come as no surprise that all industries of all sizes and companies are targets of cybercrime today. In a study conducted in 2019, every 14 seconds, a company, a business, an enterprise will fall victim to a ransomware attack. And in fact, in 2021, that has only increased. Just to let you guys know, these statistics were done pre-pandemic, and as you'll see in a moment, these issues have only been exacerbated with the with the rise of work from home and remote employees. So it really doesn't matter what industry you're in, the size of the company you're working for, cybercrime affects everyone. And the cost is upwards of $20 billion in the US across all companies. Now, businesses are struggling to discover that they're under attack. In fact, in a Harvard Business Review report that was done in 2019, they recognized that it was an average of 207 days mean time before a cyber attack was discovered. Now, listen to that for a moment. The cyber criminals were in an environment on an average of over 200 days before they initiated the crime. Now, having said that, it had also taken an average of over 2 months, almost 2.5 months, to contain the cyber attack. So we're talking about cyber criminals infiltrating an environment, spending months and months gathering information, plotting their tactics, and then it taking over 2 months to restore all business activities prior to the attack. Now, most customers have indicated that cloud migrations will actually accelerate these issues because as more touch points and more open points show up, that means that there's more targets and more ways for cyber criminals to get in. We've included a link below that actually shows the data breach report in terms of costs for specific industries. But suffice it to say, it's no longer if you're going to be attacked, it's when. And really the focus of today is going to be on the resiliency part. What happens when you get attacked and how do you ensure that your IT infrastructure is resilient to be able to do the restore part and bring your business operations back. As I mentioned before, the pandemic has only increased the vulnerabilities that are potential at clients. As more and more people work from home, more IT professionals are managing their environments remotely. Companies are recognizing that it will take longer for their employees to discover that an attack has happened because they are remotely, but more importantly, they expect that it will take longer to restore and to recover. Right? When you look at cybersecurity and IT resiliency as topics of mind, combine the two of them, we're talking over 60% of companies looking at bolstering their abilities to react to IT resiliency and cybersecurity. We think back 10 years ago when we had these discussions about resiliency in IT in general, it was generally due to natural disasters. What would happen if my data center caught on fire? What would happen if, my storage devices went offline? And it was all about disaster recovery for specific factors. It's only been in the last few years that we have to look at cyber and at malicious attacks as reasons to be able to restore environments more than just the typical oops, I hit a delete button from a restoration standpoint. So it's a good time now to look at how do we define cybersecurity versus cyber resilience. Right? Cybersecurity is all about keeping the bad actors out. How do I ensure that my data center can keep people out of the environment? And that's typically done via software detection, intrusion, things like that. What we're going to be talking about today, however, is primarily cyber resilience, because as we mentioned, it's not about the if, but it's about the when. And cyber resilience is all about after that fact. How do I ensure that my business is ready not to lose revenue with downtime? How do I ensure my business is ready not to lose its reputation for being attacked? How do I ensure that my business can recover in an appropriate amount of time? And time is the essence here. What we really want to look at, again, from a cybersecurity versus cyber resiliency standpoint, when we try to understand this in more layman's terms, right? Security is all about preventing people from getting in. I look at my house, for example. I lock the doors. That is a simple way of preventing intrusion. Prevention is all about trying to keep the bad actors out of the environment in the first place. So at home, I may have security cameras as well as the locked doors, so that at least I can recognize if someone intruded, I get that recognition. Now, resiliency, on the other hand, is about what do I do after the intruders are in, right? And then recovery, once they're in, how do I make sure that I can recover quickly and continue those business operations? Let's take a moment here to talk about what the first steps and the most important aspects are in terms of building an IT infrastructure that's cyber resilient. First, we need to look at defining the objective, and defining the objective is essentially identifying what assets you have and their importance to the business. So categorizing the types of data that you have and classifying them as mission critical, important, and maybe not as important. Once you've defined these categories and the classification of the data, it's important to validate those results. Now, historically, what we've done in the IT industry is we've classified our data as mission critical, important, and maybe not as business important from an operations standpoint. And then we've assigned specific recovery time objectives and recovery point objectives to those applications. What we tend to fail to do, though, is step 4, 5, and 6 here, where we create workflows based on those classification tools. So now that we've identified the applications that we need to protect and the recoverability and all of the intertwining that all these applications have together, it's important to create workflows to establish how am I going to restore these applications in the event of a disaster, whether that be physical, data center, or malicious attack. You create those workflows and then define a protection criteria. How should I protect that data? What should I protect that data from? How should I communicate that information back? And then the last step here from a data classification standpoint is monitoring, maintaining. Data constantly changes. It is the lifeblood of our industry today. So this isn't a situation where you can classify your data once and then leave it for 5 years. New applications are constantly coming on board. These applications have to tie into existing applications. So constantly being sure that you're maintaining this list of data classification, understanding all of your assets, and then putting monitoring software and monitoring capabilities in place to understand what's going on when it's going on. Right? Now, how do we do this? How do we develop these classification standards? And really, we look to NIST, so the National Institute of Standards and Technology, as they've developed a cybersecurity framework to help companies identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So we're just going to take a moment here to talk about these. Now, this again is an industry standard set up by NIST that a lot of companies tend to use. So first, identify the critical assets. We talked about this a moment ago. Understand what you have and its importance to the business, right? Once you've identified those assets and their importance, you have to categorize them and then decide, how am I going to protect those assets, that data? Now, we can talk about data as the data storage that's sitting on the storage devices, but we can also talk about protecting against vulnerabilities in the historic sense before cyber. You know, how do I ensure that my infrastructure is resilient from the standpoint of power failures, single points of failure within the hardware devices themselves, software vulnerabilities, all of those aspects. And then being able to protect that data, whether it's on-site on one premise, how do I move that data to another premise that could be off-site for disaster recovery capabilities or archive or backup capabilities. But then once you've established how I'm going to protect against vulnerabilities, physical, virtual, malware, it's important to understand how we can detect when something has happened. And in order to detect, you need monitoring software. Right? We're all asked to do more with less these days. So it's important that we understand what we have and be able to detect as soon as possible. You saw earlier that malware seems to infiltrate and sit in environments for days, weeks, months before it's activated. Why is that done? It's done on purpose to try and deter you from being able to detect quickly so that you can respond quickly. So leveraging monitoring software to be able to understand when something has happened is key in determining how you will respond. And the response is necessary, and the response needs to happen rapidly, but it has to happen in a calculated methodology. It cannot be haphazard. What do? The first thing you do, take everything off of the network, right? Ensure that the vulnerability cannot spread. Ensure that you have the ability to fence off your data and set up a test environment to be able to do test restoration. So that rapid response needs to have both IT involved, business involved, and key stakeholders set up and ready to go with backups. Right? Now, the last and important part is the recovery. The recover aspect is very important, not just from getting business operations up and running again, but levels of automation need to happen. In order to respond and recover rapidly, automation processes need to be in place. And what we have found in the industry is that having documented response practices, documented recovery procedures in place allow you to respond and recover more rapidly, easier, with less ability to introduce mistakes. Right? So recovering with automation is very important. Now, where do we go from here? There's some key considerations to consider for a cyber resilient infrastructure. And again, all of this has to come back to how do I classify my data? How do I determine what is mission critical from important and not so important? Because not all data is created equally. They all have different business values. So the important part to consider here is what is my recovery time objective for these specific applications? And what you want to do is you want to match the business value of the data with not only the cost of the storage that's associated with protecting it and backing it up, but also the speed at which you can restore. It used to be when we looked at backup infrastructures and resiliency infrastructures, it was all about a protection recovery point objective and recovery time objective. But now when it comes to malware and being able to do rapid restores and large scale restores rather than restoring a single file, restoring a single user's profile, restoring a single virtual machine, now we have to concentrate more on what is my recovery time objective and my recovery service level agreement. Right? How quickly can I bring back an application, bring it up and running? So we start from the bottom and work our way up. If I have a recovery time objective that is minutes or almost instantaneous, I need to ensure that I can restore quickly from an application outage, failure, cyber attack. But I need to be able to fence that off and test that environment before I bring it back in quickly. IBM Spectrum Copy Data Management integrates with production storage arrays to leverage inherent snapshot capabilities to be able to provide that almost instant restore. When we're talking about a recovery time objective of minutes, IBM Spectrum Protect Plus backup software allows you to be able to spin up test environments and do backup restores as an instant recovery from a file or virtual machine. Being application aware, that allows you to ensure that that restoration can happen easily and be able to bring your business back up and running within minutes. Right? When we start looking at longer term recovery time objectives in forms of hours or bringing data from offsite, that's when we can look at archival type storage environments like IBM's Cloud Object Storage, which can be on-premise, it can be offsite in a public cloud like R2i's cloud, where they offer object storage that can be heterogeneously dispersed across not only data centers, but in this particular case, across provinces to ensure that my data is accessible when I need it. Immutable storage is something you see here that is available with IBM Cloud Object Storage and other IBM products that provide a logical air gap to be able to prevent malware from intrusion from a backup standpoint. Very important when it comes to being able to restore, to understand at what point in time do I have to go back? How long has that ransomware been in place? How long has my infrastructure been infiltrated? And we don't want to forget about tape. When we talk about the lowest cost per terabyte of data storage itself, plus the only true offline copy where you have a physical tape cartridge sitting off-site on a shelf somewhere that cannot be penetrated by network attacks, it's very important to understand where tape situation fits in a recovery scenario.
Well, Costa,
So,
if I could just interject, you were talking about the importance of immutable storage and using cloud object storage. You'd mentioned there maybe were other areas that could provide that capability. Does IBM offer that capability on other platforms?
we do, yes. So immutable storage or logical air gap storage is currently available on our cloud object storage archival backup storage. It's also available on our DS8000 mainframe attached storage, and has been available there as something called IBM safeguarded copy. We've also made a statement of direction that that same technology will be available on our flash systems line of products to be announced. Yeah, so
Excellent.
very important to understand how to protect your data both locally as well as creating those immutable copies just in case something happens.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so now that we've defined, how do I identify my data? How do I protect it? We've looked at the key considerations for cyber resilient infrastructure. What we want to do is look at, what's available out in the marketplace today, what's available from companies like ourselves, like IBM, from R2i. And really there's a storage cyber resiliency assessment that is available for clients to be able to use that NIST cyber resiliency framework and a series of a questionnaire to help you understand where you may be in your cyber resiliency from an assessment standpoint. It can help identify blind spots, make areas of recommendation for improvement, help you discover the utilization of certain technologies that you have in place today, ensure that you're getting the most out of your current environment, and maybe bring up any topics that might come top of mind. I've been involved in numerous of these cyber assessments, and something as simple as ensuring that you've identified all of your key assets, and not just the key assets you had 5 years ago, the key assets you've had a year ago, but any new assets, any new applications, constant development that's going on. These aren't the types of scenarios where you can set it and forget it, which is why the monitoring is so important. So we have questionnaires that can come out to help assess the current state. Very low touch environments in terms of the involvement from our customers, simple questionnaire based yes or no or partial answers. And the questions are tied to these key NIST framework environments to help identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Now, through a lot of these assessments and through our interactions with our customers, we have seen some best practices, and we've seen some of the lessons learned. So I kind of want to highlight this before we come to a conclusion here. What are some of the most successes we've had in helping customers recover in the shortest amount of time? And there's some common themes here, right? Protect the family jewels, right? Protect your Active Directory or your LDAP server. Ensure that there's no single user that has super user type capabilities across server, storage, network, backup, and recovery. Right? Multi-factor authentication is very important in today's day and age, because if you have that one super user and that person's password gets compromised, you've now just given away the keys of the kingdom. So protect Active Directory, have multiple copies, make sure that you don't have that single user. Customers where we've seen a huge success in recovering from these types of attacks in the shortest amount of time also utilize tape or other forms of true air gap of their data, right? If the perpetrators have been in your environment, in your network for 200 plus days, only keeping 90 days of backup data isn't going to help you. right? And then more importantly, what happens after the fact? So ensure that there is an isolated network to do these test restores, right? Isolated network that cannot expand out to the existing production environment. So leveraging tools like Spectrum Copy Data Management, Spectrum Protect Plus, to be able to create an isolated network to do these test restores, to go back a day, run a test restore, still have the issue. Go back a week, still have an issue. Go back a month, I no longer have that issue. Having that isolated network to be able to do this testing is paramount rather than trying to just constantly restore back to the production network. Right? Protect those copies of data. Look at the 3-2-1 methodology of data protection. Right? Maintain 3 copies of your data across 2 locations. Ensure 1 copy is offline. Right? And probably the most important part here that people tend to fail to do is practice recovery processes multiple times a year. We're not talking about your standard DR test from 10 years ago, where you'd go to a DR site, pop a couple of tapes in and try to restore one application, boot to the GUI and see if it works. That's not good enough anymore. You have to practice proper recovery of entire workloads, entire aspects, to know what applications, what touch other applications, and ensure that your business can be back up and running as fast as possible. Right. With that, I'll pass it back on to Roger for next steps and closing comments.
Excellent. Well, thank you so very much, Costa, for such an informative and insightful discussion into cyber resiliency. You certainly packed a lot of great stuff in into a few short minutes. In conclusion, and as a thank you for attending this webinar, R2i and IBM are pleased to offer a no-charge IT infrastructure cyber resiliency assessment that Costa was just speaking to, so you can see how you stack up against the NIST framework and their best practices. And we'll be in touch with you to discuss this topic a bit further. And now, without further ado, we'll open it up for questions and open conversation in the 1 minute left we have till we reach our deadline. And I'm not sure, Kim, if there's any questions in the queue or any had been posted.
No, we don't have any question yet.
No. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free just to enter it in the Q&A, and we can even unmic you if you'd like to start a quick discussion. Although I think, Costa, you were so clear and concise that how could anyone possibly have any questions after that? You covered it all so well.
I do find that sometimes, people are taking notes and they want to digest the information a little bit. I know it was a lot to go through in about 20 minutes, but if you do have any follow-up questions, we're always available to take those questions offline.
Yeah. Also, this webinar will be kind of recorded and posted on our website. And if you like, we can make copies of this presentation also available to you as well. So I think with that, and right on 12:30, I will thank you all very much for attending. Thank you very much, Costa. Nicholas, thank you very much for standing by, should there have been questions that would have involved you. And we'll wish you a wonderful remainder of your day. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.